Canadian who is virtually unknown outside musical circles. But to top country, pop, and rock musicians, he's known as a chart maker. As a producer, writer, and arranger, he has created new stars, kept old ones going, and resurrected some who were fading. It's said that David Foster's name is on the dust jackets of some 70 million records.
That was unbelievable.
If there is one person most responsible for the success of Canada's Aid for Africa song, Tears Are Not Enough, it's David Foster.
One more. Okay.
You might not have heard his name, but 53 of Canada's biggest stars hung on his every word as they made this record to help the victims of famine in Africa. Tears Are Not Enough rose to #1 within a month of its release last spring and stayed there for 3 months. In all, 300,000 copies have been sold in Canada. The song was David Foster's idea. He wrote the music, he produced the record, and he's chairman of the Northern Lights for Africa Society, which will distribute the proceeds. $2.5 million so far.
Okay, guys, here we go. Ladies. Roll playback.
And in a business where performers often have enormous egos and tempers to match, the one person to keep 53 of them in line was the man who's as big a star in his field as they are in theirs.
So for some of you, you're done. And for others, we need you to stay, please.
Hi, David.
And it was absolutely more incredible.
Some of the most influential and successful people in the music industry you won't find pictured on record albums. David Foster has probably played on, written, or produced hundreds of records in this or any other record store. But to find him, you got to look in the fine print on the back. But David Foster's name is there on the albums of a virtual who's who of contemporary music. Everyone from Paul Anka to Ronnie Hawkins, from Michael Jackson to Barbra Streisand.
Olivia Newton-John was an established star who needed a hit. A rock band called The Tubes got their first big hit working with Foster. He wrote and produced a song to combine the country sound of Kenny Rogers with the pop of Sheena Easton. The Canadian group, the Payolas, first cracked the American market after Foster produced their latest album. And Foster discovered a singer named John Parr, and with him wrote a song for the movie St. Elmo's Fire, which reached #1 in the U.S.
I've had a lot of great creative moments, and I do enjoy working with established artists. It's, you know, it's so much easier when you do a good piece of product. It's so much easier when you're working with an established artist. You know that you're going to get the shot. You know you're going to get the shot at having that record heard.
There are some terrific words here.
In the music business, David Foster is as hot as they come. And it's not because he's Canadian that Anne Murray has invited him to Eastern Sound in Toronto to produce 2 cuts for her new album, one of them also written by Foster.
He just has his finger in the pulse of what's going on right now. Everything's very synthesized. Some of the records he does all by himself, and no one else is involved, and he can do that. I watched him do it yesterday.
You like Glenn Fry's singing?
I have come to a stage in my career where I have to now take a good hard look at everything and involve myself with people who are state-of-the-art contemporary people.
You and Don Henley together would kill me. I mean, you hit every market.
In the business, it's called the Foster sound. It's slick, tightly produced, lavishly orchestrated, and most important, it sells. Foster's name as writer, performer, or producer is on the credits of almost 70 million records. It all began in Saanich, British Columbia, just outside Victoria. Foster is the middle child with 6 sisters. His father, who took these home movies, was superintendent of the Saanich Municipal Works Yard. but he encouraged his family to love music. Before he could write his name, David Foster could play the piano. At age 3, he'd climb onto the piano stool to play his older sister's lessons by ear. And it was about the same time that his mother, Eleanor, discovered he had perfect pitch.
He was in the kitchen playing on the floor with his little trucks, and I was in the living room, and I was just dusting the piano off, and he called out what notes I had hit. So I hit some notes then, and he called them out, and they were right. And then I hit some chords, and he told me what those were. And I thought, oh, there's something wrong with this child. So I phoned his dad at work and told him. And he got so excited that he came home from work. And he did the same thing, hit notes, and David called him, hit chords, and David called him. And his dad was just totally beside himself. He was so excited.
Young David took 8 years of piano lessons from the Royal Conservatory of Music, learning the classics. Though in the 1960s it wasn't Bach, but the Beatles who captured Foster's imagination. Soon there were bands rehearsing in the living room, and Foster's fingers tickled the ivories to the beat of rock and roll. England was the hotbed of music then, and at the age of 16, Foster dropped out of school to venture across the Atlantic with his Victoria Band. In a storybook twist, they ended up backing rock and roll greats Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley.
It was very frustrating. You know, I couldn't learn what I wanted to learn in school. I wanted to know about music. I wanted to know about records and recording. And
What was that like for you, at the age of 16, to be in Europe playing with the likes of Chuck Berry or Bo Diddley?
well, as far as playing with Chuck Berry went, I didn't even know who he was. I mean, I had come from a classical background, and when we finally did end up playing with him, I remember being thoroughly bored with his music, and his songs all sounded the same to me. They were all in the key of C, and they were all went C, F, G.
What, the father of rock and roll?
I'm sorry. And it's, of course, many years later, I appreciate his contribution.